I made a bold decision about a year and a half ago that as much as I enjoyed writing those Harlequins, the market, I was going to make a certain amount of money, but it was limited by how prolific I could write. And the people that are successful in that line are very prolific, and they build up a readership over a series of years. And I realized it was time for me to switch genres again. And I went off contract, which was kind of a difficult decision for me. I switched agents and I ultimately switched publishers, and it's been the best thing I ever could have done for my career.
Welcome to the Author Like a Boss podcast, the podcast for indie authors who want to improve their writing, up-level their marketing, make money with their books, and have fun doing it. Now, onto the show with your host, Ella Barnard.
Hello, bosses. Hello, everybody. We are here today with one of my favorite people in the industry, Debbie Herbert. Debbie Herbert is a USA Today, Publishers Weekly, and Washington Post bestselling author. Plus, she was #1 on all of Amazon just a couple months ago. Debbie Herbert writes psychological suspense, romantic suspense, and paranormal romance novels. She's always been fascinated by magic, romance, and gothic stories. She is traditionally published by Thomas and Mercer and Harlequin, as well as indie published. Married and living in Alabama, she roots for the Crimson Tide football team. Debbie enjoys recumbent bicycling and jet skiing with her husband. She has 2 grown sons, and the oldest has autism. Characters with autism frequently land in her works, even when she doesn't plan on it. We talked about this a little bit because I've interviewed Debbie before. So if you guys haven't listened to that, you should definitely check out that episode where we talk about a little bit about some of those things. But today we get to talk with Debbie again. I'm so excited to hear about her story. For those of you who have not listened to the other episode, I'm going to ask Debbie, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your author journey?
Okay, sure. And glad to be here. It's always so much fun to talk to you, Ella. I started writing almost 9 years ago, and started off, it was kind of in the post-Twilight phase where everybody was writing YA paranormal. And I love Twilight. And my first couple books I wrote in a series were YA paranormal. And I tried so hard to sell those books and get an agent, and had absolutely zero success. I garnered over 300 agent rejections, which has gotten to be some kind of record. I'm going to take pride in that. But finally, I realized, maybe it's not me in my writing. Maybe it's what I'm writing. It could be the market for this is dried up. So I decided I was going to write something really fun that I would enjoy. And if I didn't make it on this book, I was ready to quit. So I wrote this very quirky mermaid romance. And I immediately got an agent, and she sent it to Harlequin, and the Harlequin editor that picked it up snapped it up the first day. She read it and said she just was sneak reading at work all day and, couldn't wait to offer for it. So my first publication was with Harlequin with the Mermaid Romance series. It was in their now defunct Harlequin Nocturne line, which was paranormal romance. And ended up writing 6 books with them. And I could see every year that the distribution on those books and sales were kind of going down, because the indie market has such a huge inroads on paranormal romance that the New York publishers, really, they couldn't compete with them. And also, just for me personally, I learned a little bit more about the market over the years and realized that I wasn't really writing the kind of tropes that were popular. I didn't know anything about studying the market and looking on Amazon at what the top sellers were and what the tropes were. And, I didn't really write sexy shifters. I write weird stuff. Mermaids and Native American folk tales and, stuff I just enjoyed writing. So I decided I needed to branch out. And a theme, I think, in my paranormal romance and what readers told me was that they liked the suspense in them, and that they liked kind of the atmospheric kind of writing about the Deep South. So I thought, I am going to try a romantic suspense. It'll still be romance, still a lot of suspense. And really the transition to that genre wasn't so bad. And I sold to the Harlequin Intrigue line, which is their romantic suspense line that's heavy on suspense. And did very well. The first book that they published with that made the Publishers Weekly bestseller list. I was helped tremendously by the cover, which featured a pregnant woman in a flannel shirt carrying a shotgun. It was different, I think, from other covers, and it didn't hurt that it was placed next to Heather Graham on the shelves at Walmart. So. But I'll take all the credit. So I did that, and I made a bold decision about a year and a half ago that as much as I enjoyed writing those Harlequins, the market, I was going to make a certain amount of money, but it was limited by how prolific I could write. And the people that are successful in that line are very prolific, and they build up a readership over a series of years. And I realized it was time for me to switch genres again. And I went off contract, which was kind of a difficult decision for me. I switched agents, and I ultimately switched publishers, and it's been the best thing I ever could have done for my career. So now I'm writing psychological suspense.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, and I'm going to, we have some topics I want to touch on, but something caught my ear.
Okay.
That you were saying. So you were saying that you weren't following the tropes for the paranormal romance.
Right.
Are you following the tropes for psychological suspense?
I think the first book is always a little bit of an experimentation when you go to a different genre. Mm-hmm. And I can see that it is a little bit different in that it's very, has a Southern Gothic kind of a feel to it, which is, I think, different from most of the other psychological suspense. But whether that's helped or hurt me, I think the jury's still out on that. It's also new to me. I kind of can't help my voice to some extent. It just kind of bleeds through. But I have, since this book came out, and really right before it came out, I have been reading and listening to audiobooks more and more psychological suspense. And I think I have a better understanding of the tropes in it now than I did earlier. And I'm trying to adjust my writing in my current books where I have more police procedural descriptions in it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about, because I'm really curious, a lot of people have a lot of genres they want to write in, or they have one genre and it's not working well like you have. And how do you make that decision? Because there's, one guy, Jonathan Yanez, is one of my favorite interviews as well. And he wrote urban fantasy. He wrote 15 urban fantasies before he was like, you know what, trying something else. And then the trying something else one took off. And everybody's kind of wondering, how do you make that choice of switching genres, and how? There's a number of questions around that, but let's just start with that.
Okay. First of all, I wrote the books I enjoyed, and I don't regret those 6 books I wrote. I did find a bit of a readership with it. It broke me into the publishing world. I had fun writing them, but I realized that I wasn't making the kind of money I wanted to make, frankly. And
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Some people make you feel bad for saying you want to make money.
I'm not one of them.
Good. Because I have a few very successful indie author friends who were just, hand over fist making money. And I was very jealous. And it's not just the money. I do enjoy building a readership. I like connecting with readers. I want to, I'm in entertainment business. I want people to read and enjoy my books. So, and I also learned too, I used to think when I was a newbie that being unique was a ticket to success, but really it's not. It's doing doing the familiar tropes, but putting your own spin on it. And I didn't understand that. And I was thick-headed. I think it took me longer to realize than it does other people who are more market savvy. So when I made the decision to switch to romantic suspense, I knew at that point that it sold better in the publisher's line I was in. And I could kind of see the writing on the wall that the paranormal market with Harlequin was drying up. So I went to romantic suspense and enjoyed it. And I'd always had this idea for a psychological suspense. And I thought, I'm just going to take a big chance. I'm going to slow down the contracts I have, and I'm going to write the psychological suspense. Because what if it's the book that, gives me a breakthrough? And I want to write it. I think it'd be fun to write. So I did that. And, it ended up being the book that's got me the most sales by far.
Okay. So I have a question about the being unique versus following the tropes with your own spin.
Yeah.
What is that? I think a lot of creative people, every time I ask a brand new author what genre their first book is, they're like, it doesn't really fit any genre.
I did that with those first books I wrote because they were kind of YA, but also kind of new adult. They were college age, but it had a YA tone. And then there was a whole lot of paranormal in there. And it was like, if you have trouble identifying your market, you're probably going to have trouble selling the book. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because, I just think of, like, for me personally, when I go on Amazon to search for a book, I have a very certain search terms I look for. I look for Southern psychological suspense. If there's some quirky book out there that doesn't fit those search terms, how am I ever going to find it? I won't.
And that's everybody. That's every single reader is just like Debbie with their own search terms.
Right.
And if you don't fit into any of those search terms, how are they going to find you?
Right. I mean, it would never occur to me to type in something really unique like space opera, Western, whatever mishmash, of genres you have going on.
Right. Right. And then I found that when people read it, people have an expectation for an experience that they want to have with your story.
Exactly.
And sometimes, like, have you ever been to one of those like artsy movies, like those indie movies that are super artsy?
They're not for me, but yeah.
Yes, but we've been to one, right? And you're like, sometimes you're like, wow, that was amazing. And sometimes you're like, I don't know what I just did. Like,
what was that all about?
What was that? I don't think I need to do that again, right. And you go back to the Avengers because you know what you're going to get.
Exactly. And that's such a good point, because when I was writing for Harlequin, that is such a specific readership to write for. And, in a lot of ways, with a built-in audience like that, it makes your job so much easier. If you have a template or an outline and the tropes, it's a lot easier, less stressful to me to write that kind of book. Okay.
Now we want to know how, because you can go and find the tropes. There's websites about tropes. There's, you're like second chance trope for romances. Like, you can go find the tropes. I think there's a website called like tvtropes.com.
I was going to suggest that's the one.
It is amazing.
Everything you can think of is there.
Yes, I really love it. But how do you add, and you seem to be using the word quirky for yours, but how do you add your own spin? Like, how does that your voice or your own spin, how does that work?
In some ways, and I'm trying to think of a way to word it that would be helpful to other writers, because I almost can't help the way I write and my voice. A sense of place is very important to me, and I treat setting like a character. And that might be a little old-fashioned, but it's what makes me unique. And I think the way to find what is unique about your writing and how it can still fit in tropes is to look at your reviews and see what kind of common themes that readers have left that they enjoyed about your books. that's kind of how I figured out mine. And I went to a lecture one time at an RWA conference. And are you familiar with the romance writer Jane Ann Krentz?
No.
Okay, she's New York Times bestseller, super successful, but she writes under 3 different pen names with different romance subgenres. With Jane Ann Krentz, she writes contemporary.
Oh, wait, yes, Jane Ann Krentz. The way that you said it with your accent. I was like, no, I don't know her. Yes, she was my first
podcast so people can understand.
Amanda Quick was my first romance.
Mine too.
Ever.
My husband bought it for me one Christmas as a little stocking stuffer,
Yes.
and I've ever since read everything she wrote.
Yes.
And she also writes Jane Castle, like futuristic,
Yes.
paranormal kind of romance. And anyway, I heard her speaking at a conference, and she said, she felt like she was all over the place writing these 3 different genres. And then she realized that no, the common theme in all of her works are marriages or arrangements of convenience, because she loves to thrust male and female characters together that don't really know each other and have a backstory, and they're thrust in an intimate situation and how they make it work. I thought that's so cool to look at it in a thematic kind of a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't know that about yourself until you've been writing for a while.
Right.
It's the unconscious things that you put in. Debbie, I told you that I wrote a short story.
Yes.
And everybody, I wrote a short story under Eleanor Wyatt. But I was describing it to somebody like just not even like the plot points, kind of just like the plot points that weren't even within the setting. It was just like, this happens, it's this kind of woman. And as I was saying it, which I should have realized as I was writing it, but I didn't. I was like, oh, I wrote this story about myself.
Of course.
But it was like, oh, like I don't have magical powers. I don't have, I don't live in fairy, but I was describing it. I was like, oh, this is me. And I think I read about Stephen King. He said he had, when you look back over the collection of all of his books, he's got a few themes. I think he has that he talks about this in his book on writing, where he's like, then I realized that these kind of themes were the ones that I use the most often.
Right. Yeah. And mine show up in character arcs. It's a lot about people accepting themselves and then feeling part of a community.
Yeah. So you put your little Southern flair into it.
Yeah.
Your quirkiness. I like quirkiness. I think that's why we like each other so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we get along so well, Debbie.
It's boring.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember one time you mentioned, I'm going to stick on this writing theme for a little bit, because you mentioned that you have like this 20-point outline. Do you still use that for your psychological thrillers?
I don't.
Yeah.
And what I've more gone to is looking at a traditional 3-act structure, because I find the psychological suspense didn't fit the old template, because I'm writing in so many different POVs, and the chapters vary in length so much. I mean, one of the things I love about suspense, you can have a chapter that's just a couple pages, and then you can turn around and write a 15-page chapter. It all just depends on what I'm going for with what character at the time. So it didn't really kind of fit the traditional 20-chapter template I have for my Harlequins. But, there's a lot of universal things about storytelling. I still look at my different plot points and, the climax and the black moment and all that. So everything builds on what you've learned previously and what worked for you previously. It's a matter of tweaking it sometimes.
You guys can't see this, but I'm looking at Debbie. She's got a whiteboard behind her.
Oh yeah. I'm in revisions right now for a book that's coming out by Thomas and Mercer in February 2020, and it just is helpful to me to visually lay out what has happened in every chapter, because I'm having to do some rearranging of the chapters.
Yeah. I'm like, Oh, I think that says chapter 2, chapter 3, and they're all different colors.
Yeah, depending on the POV, I've switched colors. Yeah, you have my own little method.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's fun.
Let's talk a little bit about revising because I brought that up.
Okay.
This is my question because you've written both indie and traditional.
Right.
Is there a difference in the revising process? Because I know writing is probably going to be similar. The first draft is the first draft.
Right.
Right. But what is there a difference in the process for revising?
Absolutely. The revising on my indie books, you have so much more total control with indie. If you don't necessarily agree with an editorial change, you don't have to take it. That's not so much the case with traditional publishing. And, the advantage, I think, with traditional over indie, one advantage with indie is the control.
Mm-hmm.
I think one advantage with traditional is I have learned so much working with different professional editors, helping me to see things that I would never have found on my own. So that's been a really great experience. As much as I dislike revising and editing, I probably learn more from that process than I do just straight writing.
Mm.
Yeah.
You dislike revising and editing?
No, I dislike it.
Yeah.
I don't mind, the minor editing stuff, going back and proofreading and beefing up word choice, the kind of minor things. But the structural things, like in the current revision I'm doing, I had to delete several chapters of a character that they just decide to delete it, and they want more from the cop's POV, so I had to add cop POV scenes. I didn't want to do it because I don't know. I don't feel like I know enough about police procedures, but I'm learning. And I rewrote it and did the police procedure routines. And, sure enough, 9 times out of 10, I find out the editorial suggestions are the correct ones. Even if I have some initial pushback on it, they always make the book better. And I've learned over the years when I get, whether indie or traditional, when I get editorial feedback and it's not 100% love it, let's publish it as is, which is very rare. I think I've had that happen on 2 books. But, when you get those revision, and even though they're constructive criticism, I always give myself at least 24 hours before I write back to the editor and respond to their suggestions, because I immediately find myself on the defensive. I'm saying things in my mind like, well, I did it this way because, or can't you understand why this works this way? And then I have to kind of sleep on it and think about it and envision, okay, if I went a different way, how would that affect the story? And I usually realize that they're right. It can be better. Yeah.
I think it helps having an editor that you trust.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're like, this person knows what they're talking about. So,
right.
So, if you ever need, I've interviewed a number of police officers on this podcast, so I'd be happy to put you in contact with them if you want.
Yes, we need to talk afterwards.
Yes, let's talk afterwards.
Okay.
So you wrote this you moved from paranormal romance to psychological suspense. Tell us about the name of the book and when it came out and what happened.
Okay.
What happened, Debbie? Number 1 on Amazon. I was like, Debbie!
How lucky. Yeah. Shocking.
I was way behind the times, too. She's like, yeah, it's been there for a while. And I'm like, oh, oops.
The name of the book is Cold Waters, and it was published by Thomas and Mercer, which is Amazon Publishing's suspense imprint. It's not indie, it's, their own publishers. And, my agent and I, we never requested the first reads program. It was just my editor felt like with it being my debut in psychological suspense, it would really help me gain readers. And she just really enjoyed the book and wanted it for me. So she just out of the blue called my agent one day and said, in April of 2019, Debbie's book is going to be featured in the Amazon First Reads programs in, I think it was America, UK, and Australia. I think those are the 3 countries. And for people who aren't familiar with Amazon First Reads, if you're an Amazon Prime member, every month you get a selection of 6 free books. And mine was one of the 6 free books. So, Amazon sends out this newsletter to, I don't think they publicly say how many Prime members they have. Who knows? It may be millions, it may be hundreds of thousands. I don't know. But they sent out that email in April, and the book was released April 1st as a first read selection. And let me see, I woke up that morning and I was number 40 on Amazon, and I checked like 30 minutes later and I was number 1 in the Amazon store, and kind of took my breath away. So
yeah.
I ended up for 3 of 4 weeks in April, I had the number 1 selling book on Amazon Kindle. And it was a great experience, very heady. It was amazing. I don't know quite what else to say about it. I got all kind of attention that I never got before, and wonderful. It was wonderful.
Okay. A few questions.
Okay.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
It's so exciting. Yeah. It's another reason to be a member of Amazon Prime. I am a member of Amazon Prime.
I love Amazon Prime.
I know. I'm a member, and so they send out, so you get this, you could get it as a notification on your Kindle or an email or something, and it's like, don't forget your first reads. I always forget them. I always forget the first reads.
If they didn't send me the email, I'd forget.
Yeah. But then and so you get to choose one book of the 6 options that they send you, and you get it for free. And yours was, I think, the most genre fiction of the options of April. I don't know.
Yes, I agree.
A lot of them were literature, or I think maybe some nonfiction or historical.
Yeah, there were some biographies, some literary fiction.
Yep.
A woman's fiction.
Yes. And so it didn't surprise me, because of all the ones, and I read a lot, I was like, this is the one I want. And I don't often read psychological suspense, but it was of the ones that I'd be most likely to read for fun. Right. Plus, I knew you, so I was like, I have to get this one.
Yay! Thanks for getting it.
But I would have anyway, is my point. Yeah. So I have a question, because I don't know about the First Reads program. I know that you got a lot of attention. How does that translate? And you don't have to give any details at all, but does it translate into money?
I have not received a statement yet. But
okay.
Yes, it's going to translate into money, because it sold a lot of hardcover copies, which I've always heard is where the real money is in publishing, traditional publishing. I've sold a lot of audiobooks with it, and they did such a great job with the audiobook. I just love the narrators. Everything's been top notch working with Amazon. I know a lot of indie authors have a love-hate relationship with them, but I've loved working with them. They've been fantastic. And also, I wrote a second book in the series after I'd already sold Cold Waters to them. And my agent said, it's probably going to be a few weeks or months. They're going to see how Cold Waters does. And then, if your sales are good, they'll offer for the second book. Well, I can't remember if it was the first day or second day. I looked on Amazon, and they put my second book up for sale. It's not coming out until February of 2020. So
I saw it.
And I wrote my ad. I said, I think they're going to buy it.
Yeah.
So,
they're already doing pre-order. So this has super helped my backlist, even though it's a different genre than my backlist. It still helped it a lot. And it's also helped on pre-orders of the second book. And, it's dropped to like number 200 over the holiday weekend. It's just, it started falling. It started the natural, thing that happens after your book's been out a while. But, it's been such a tremendous help to my backlist. And I've made more money on my indie books in the last few weeks than I've ever made. Not that I've made a tremendous amount. I just have 2 indie books and 2 indie novellas. And I have been trying for years to get a BookBub ad, and they always turn me down. And then in April, I wrote them and said, you know what? I have the number 1 book on Amazon Kindle right now. Just made the Washington Post bestseller list. Would you consider
this indie book set of mine. And, they said yes. It was international only, which, is not as good as getting a U.S. deal. But, I got my foot in the door with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for, indie writers, BookBub is so critical unless you are very savvy with Facebook ads.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for you then, because this next book in the series comes out February 2020, which is right now it is May.
Right. Yeah.
The end of May, but May. So are you planning, or is there an idea, a possibility in your mind of writing more indie books?
Yes, but
yeah.
Yes, but I've had more success with traditional than indie. Mm-hmm. And I know now why my indie books did not do so great. We've talked about that. The genres I wrote, the trope was not there. But I do have a Christmas novella I'd really love to do. I just don't know if I can find the time to work it in with the current contracts I've got going on. We'll see. I'd like to. I am not the fastest writer by any means, unfortunately. And I think that's one of the reasons I've had more success with my non-indie books is I think with indie, you have to be very prolific.
I'm not very fast either.
Yeah.
I'm a very slow writer. That makes me feel a lot better, Debbie, because I think a lot of people you see, I certainly do. I look at how fast these people are releasing and I'm like, oh, the only way I can have success is if, I can release a book every 2 to 3 months. And there's no way I can do that.
Me either. I think that's a fast track for a lot of successful indie authors. And it makes me feel so guilty. I can't do it. But, I've had to just take a deep breath and say, good for them. I am glad for them that they can do it. It doesn't mean I can follow their process. And there are many paths to success, and I just have to find the one that works for me.
Yeah. A question for you. I'm going to veer a little bit into, Debbie, I'm a little bit woo-woo.
Oh, I am very woo-woo.
Okay.
I was trying to find... There's a pendant. I've got
she's got a pendant. Okay. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So as I'm listening to your story, what's striking me, and you guys, so Debbie, what she didn't say in this interview that she said in the previous interview is that she's retired and she's having all this success, is her second life career
in my old age.
Yes, like she retired from her whatever she was doing before that I don't remember. I just remember that she was like, and then I decided to start writing.
Yeah.
So and it seems like, yes, while it hasn't all been like easy peasy, you have 300 rejections from agents on the one, it also feels like there's this kind of natural flow to it that it's like, I did this and it didn't work, so I tried something else and then it worked, and then this didn't seem to be going so well, so I kind of shifted and now that worked. And I'm curious, as my woo-woo self, like what kind of, and it has to do with mindset, I think, as well. So that's not woo-woo, it's just the way that you think about things is practical. Yeah. But
mindset is huge.
Yeah, I'm curious about how do you approach this part of your life? How do you mentally or spiritually or emotionally, how do you approach this part of your life that you were able to, and what kind of mindset do you have when you approach it? And do you think, how has that affected your success? Like, in what ways? What would you say, okay, this is something that I do, or this is the way I think about it, and that has caused an effect for this part of my success. There we go.
There you go. That's a great question. And I'll try to stumble through my answer on it because I can write better than I can think aloud. I do believe that the universe gives you signs and nudges if you pay attention and listen to it. And I think if you're not having success in some area, you need to not just analyze, okay, why am I not experiencing success here? I think you also need to listen to your heart, to meditate, and the answers will come to you. And you may think it's just being logical, right? Left brain talking and saying, okay, you're not finding success in this market. Why don't you switch to another? But I think your heart and your mind are guided, and it leads to making new decisions. Sure, I would have loved overnight success, but I think I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know my craft enough. I didn't know marketing enough. I wasn't mentally prepared for it. And I think the universe knew that. And it's okay to take a slower path and to slowly build and discover yourself and your process along the way.
Okay. How have your nudges, like the intuitive, how do those show up? Like, do you have an example?
Yeah, I think the signs are, if you are, I was doing what I loved. I was writing. I had some success. I mean, I wasn't a total failure. I had some readers. I was selling books, but I just knew that I wanted to try for bigger. And if I failed, I would be heartbroken, but at least I'd tried. And I think the nudges were just that desire in me to try to improve and go after my dreams. And if something didn't work, then the universe was saying, you need to try another way.
Mm-hmm. So you had this story idea in your mind for the psychological suspense.
Yeah. And I'm not a big risk taker at all. I wish I was. But my heart was telling me, you should take a risk on this. It'll be worth it. Even if you fall flat on your face with it, you will have at least tried, and you should do it. And I did it. And I'm so glad I did.
How does that feel? Because that's, I think, the challenge that a lot of people have is that maybe they do have that nudge. Maybe they have their heart saying, try this, but it's scary.
Yeah.
How do you... I asked my sister one time. So I asked my sister because she's always been better at doing scary things than I am. Mm-hmm. And so I asked her one time, I'm like, how do you do it? Like, how do you, like, I'm like literally like when you're faced with a scary thing, but you do it anyway, what are you doing like mentally? And she said that she acknowledges the scary thing. And it's like she's looking forward and it's in her peripheral vision and she just doesn't look at it. Like,
I love that. She ignores it.
It's there. She can see that it's there, but she's like, I am not looking at that thing because I'm going this way. Right. And so I guess that was the best way she could describe it. How do you do that thing? Like, do you have some kind of processes or I don't know.
I'm thinking of a book title I just happened to see on Amazon a few days ago, and I probably need to order this book, but the title of it was just Do It Scared. And I think as writers, we do that a lot of times when we sit down to write. Even though I try to outline, I don't really know where the story's going to take me. I don't know if readers will hate it. I don't know if anybody's going to buy it, but it's always ultimately in the end worth it to try it and just see what happens. I guess I tell myself everything's an experiment. If it takes, it takes. That's great. If it doesn't take, that just means you need to try a different angle or try something different.
I think that's for me, Debbie, the thing that's come with age.
Yeah, because all of a sudden I wake up and I'm in my 60s. I think, if you don't do it now, when?
Yeah, that and I've had more failures and realized that I'm still okay.
Right.
I'm like, I've failed at quite a few things at this point, and I'm still okay. So I'm like, oh.
That just means you've tried things, and that's great.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about myself over the past few weeks. From the outside, you may look at it and say, oh, wow, look how good that book sold. But I discovered in myself that I've not only had a fear of failure all my life, I've also had a fear of success. Because when all of a sudden something takes off, you feel like you're under a spotlight and you're being judged. It's not safe anymore. You're not just, somebody who is so obscure, nobody's ever heard of them or read them. All of a sudden, there's people reading your baby, your work. And man, I had some bad reviews.
I saw one of them.
Yeah, my editor said, expect them. It happens with the First Reads program. There's going to be people that, even if they like suspense, your book isn't going to be the classical whodunit or, it's just they have a very specific, limited number of books to choose from, and they take a chance on you. And I picked up a lot of new readers, and they love me, but there's some people that just hated me. I mean, hated the book.
Yeah.
So, and I had to, it shut me down for a few days, some of the bad reviews. I had to give myself a good talking to and say, look, it happens to everybody. And that's part of success. Isn't all money and flowers and everybody loves you. That's not realistic, and that's not what it's all about. And besides some of the bad reviews, I also felt this pressure, and I actually could feel it in my chest about, okay, I had a number one book on Amazon. Now what? Am I going to disappoint my editor and agent and readers if I don't have that success again? So, for me, this has been a learning process for me to work through some of these issues. And I guess my point is, it doesn't matter where you are in your writer's journey, whether you're struggling to find your first agent, sell your first book, whatever milestone you're going for. I used to think if I just sold a book, that meant I had made it. Mm-hmm. And then you sell a book and think, oh, no, I want to be a bestseller. And then you reach that and think, oh, no, I want this, I want that. And it never stops. There's always goals you want to reach. And then when you start to hit some of them, you think, well, can I replicate this success? Mm-hmm. What if I'm one and done and this is it?
Yeah.
So you might as well work on your mindset wherever you're at in your journey and try to develop your strength and your tough hide, and try not to be so sensitive if some people don't love you. It's okay.
The context matters. You're in the First Reads program. So I don't usually read psychological suspense, but I downloaded your book.
Right.
I'm not your ideal reader for that particular type of story.
Exactly.
And anybody who some of them will be your ideal reader, but some of them won't. And they're not necessarily going to like it as much, even though they downloaded the book.
Right. Some people will think it's the worst book they've ever read. I know.
Okay, so you had the success, and you got some good reviews, you got some bad reviews, and you're feeling this pressure. Mm-hmm. How do you keep your creativity in the face of bad reviews?
I think in my case, it's having written deadlines that I have to meet.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, I'm not ever going to break a contract or ask for an extension on a deadline unless, there's been a death in the family or, some major disaster. That's just not me. That's not my way. I'm just going to keep going. And really the only way to get over disappointment is to keep pushing through it. Because if you quit and say, okay, well, my feelings are hurt, I'm not going to write anymore. I'll show them. No, the other people have won. You need to keep writing, and it would just make me feel worse not to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, you guys, I think that's why Debbie, I think that's why you've had the success, because you look at it and you're like, yes, but how does this affect me? And you're like, I'm just going to do what feels good to me.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't feel good to quit. Not in the long run. If you feel like you are hurting that, inner creativity, the universe, whatever you want to call it, you're not answering the call, you're giving up. Mm-hmm. And that's never a good feeling. I mean, what am I going to do? Just lay down and quit? And, like a 2-year-old child just, have a little temper tantrum. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep going on. Sometimes there's disappointments. Sometimes the sales aren't going to be what you like, or sometimes you're not going to get offers that you thought you might get, but there's always second chances. And that's one of the things I like to write about in romance is second chances. But I feel that way about life too, that if something doesn't happen, it just means the universe is just telling you the time wasn't right and you need to go in a new direction and try something different.
Mm-hmm. And it might not even be that big of a new direction. Like it might not be like, oh, they didn't like my writing, so now I have to become a painter.
Right.
You know, it might just be like slightly different genre. Like you went from YA paranormal to kind of paranormal suspense to kind of
right. It was just a progression.
Tiny pivots, slight pivots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've got a cat who's, I saw you with your orange cat earlier, and my orange cat is just snuck behind the computer. Okay. So I'm really curious about this, and I really appreciate you sharing kind of the scared of success, because I think that's not something that people talk about or acknowledge very often. One of the books I've read, and I can't remember who wrote it, but it talks about upper limit problems, which is you have your comfort zone. I think it's Gay Hendricks. And you have your comfort zone. And as you start to reach the top of your comfort zone, you'll start self-sabotaging in order to remain in your comfort zone.
Yes. Oh, man. It's so easy to get in that comfort zone.
Yeah. Even though success is outside of the comfort zone, because even though you're like, oh, I'd be so much more in your mind, and I'd be so much more comfortable if I had plenty of money or whatever it is that would make a difference for you to be successful.
Right.
But if that's not where you've spent the bulk of your time, it might not be within your comfort zone.
Right.
And as you start reaching the top of your comfort zone, you start, you'll get sick, or there'll be some kind of accident, or all of a sudden crazy things start to happen in your life, or all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have to do this thing that you've been putting off maybe forever. And then all of a sudden it becomes necessary.
I can't tell you how many times I've been on deadline and I have to get something done, and all of a sudden I have to clean the baseboards in my kitchen. Yeah. Our minds are very funny.
Yes. Or you're like, oh, I definitely have to clean the fridge out today. Today is a good day for cleaning out the fridge. Nobody wants to do that.
It has to be done today.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And that keeps you within the comfort zone, but doesn't allow you to reach that success if that kind of success is out of your comfort zone. So I appreciate you talking about that kind of the discomfort of success.
Right. Because, the more successful you are, the more open that your work is or yourself is to people in general. And with that, there's always a risk. Some are going to like you, some are not. So, yeah, it's hard. It would have been easy just to say, oh, I'm just going to stay in a particular genre. I have a certain amount of readership. I've had a little bit of a success, and I think I want to stay here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now tell us about some of the benefits of the success. And it doesn't have to be financially, but just beyond financially, I'm curious about some of the benefits mentally, emotionally, physically in your life.
Well, there was a lot of validation with it, and I had to laugh one day because I told you about all the early agent rejections I had in the hundreds. And 9 years ago, what I wouldn't have given for this to happen, just out of the blue, I got an email from a top agent at a top New York City agency saying, I saw the success of your book and I'd like to represent you. And I'm like, where were you 9 years ago?
Yeah.
But, when things like that start to happen, it's very validating. It does help build your confidence. And I'm not going to do any name dropping, but I have met some other very successful writers in the last few weeks. And, I had put them on a pedestal, and they are just like me. They have the same insecurities, which you would never think with their success that they would. But it's funny. It's not what you think it is. And it's really a very cool thing.
Okay. How, you don't have to name drop, but how is it a direct result of your success that you've met these really big authors?
Yes, I wouldn't have met him otherwise. We met on a private Facebook group I was invited to.
Oh.
Yeah, who knew it even existed?
You
right?
wouldn't know.
So,
wow.
Like that started happening.
Whoa.
And I don't want anybody to come away with the impression that Debbie Herbert thinks she's number one now and she's got it made and she's the super successful chick. Because no, I mean, this could be a flash in the pan. It might not ever happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm very well aware of that. I'm the same person I've always been. I always will be the same. So,
yeah. But
whether it works out or not in the future. So.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's thinking that, Debbie. I certainly am not.
All right.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's thinking that. You just sound like somebody who's putting the work in and pivoting a little bit, paying attention to the market and paying attention to your heart and doing what you love, writing. So,
right. And I don't think you're one of these. I don't believe in that argument that you write for your heart or you write for the market. You can combine it. It's just a matter of finding where you fit in, trying different things.
Yeah, and we talked in the last episode about community, and like the last time we chatted, we talked a lot about community and finding people to help encourage you when you're feeling difficult. And obviously you're in a different part of your author career now, because it's not a matter of, maintaining your dedication to the craft anymore or to your career. It's a matter of managing it. Right. So exciting.
Very well put. Yes.
Yeah. So, I know, typically most of the people I interview are indie authors, but I just, I think you're such an amazing woman. So I was like, I don't care. I love Debbie. Even though my husband's like, she's an Alabama fan.
I know. Roll Tide.
I know.
You be sure and tell him I said Roll Tide.
I will. He's listening right now. Hun, Debbie said Roll Tide. He didn't like that.
He's just gagging.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So even though, but I think your success has happened largely because of your mindset. But I'm curious what you would say is your best advice for people who are looking to have your success.
It's nothing ground shattering that they probably haven't heard before, but it takes absolute dedication. And by that, I don't mean you have to write 12 hours a day. I mean that most days you sit in front of the computer and you try your best to churn out a few pages and, learn a little bit more about craft. And maybe, every week you meet one or two new people to count as your writer friends, or you try something different in your marketing. You take it at your pace, try to enjoy it, and, realize that I truly believe if you write a good book, you're going to find success in some way, be it indie, traditional, whatever. And it really doesn't matter what path it comes to you from, as long as you're enjoying it and doing the best you can. I have, honestly, several indie author friends who tell me, why aren't you going down a different path? Why aren't you doing more indie work? And you could make more money and blah, blah, blah. But I have just found for me, the traditional has worked out best. And I think you should be happy and not feel guilty about your choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody has a different path.
Right.
And I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. And everybody who listens will have their own path, and that's okay. There are many different paths. to success, as evidenced by the fact that I can keep interviewing a different author every week, and everybody has their own story.
Right.
And none of them are the same. So.
Yeah. And boy, you have interviewed some major successful people.
I know, like you.
Oh.
Yeah, same old Debbie, number one on Amazon. No biggie. I'm just small fish.
I love your cat.
And there's Cat. Okay, where is the best place for people to find you?
Probably I love Facebook. I'm on Facebook a lot. They can go to my personal page, Debbie Herbert. I don't have a pen name. Or they go to Debbie Herbert Author. And of course, they can always follow me on Amazon. I try to tweet, but I really suck at it.
Yeah, I'm terrible at it as well.
It feels shallow to me. It's just not my thing.
It's hard for me to tweet as well. And you can also find her at debbieherbert.com. It's probably links to most of her social media.
Yes.
Yay. Okay. So the name of the book is Cold Waters, or Cold Water.
Waters, plural.
Waters. Cold Waters. It's on Amazon. Book 2 is coming out. It's available for pre-order.
Thank you. I always have to throw that in.
I can see the revisions on the back wall, on the whiteboard behind.
Hard at work.
Yep. It's a Southern suspense. So I think that's fun. I think Southern adds a twist to it that people probably really enjoy.
I guess so. It's all I know, but I suppose we're unique to other parts of the country.
Yes. For people like me, I'm like, ooh, what are they doing down there? All they do is drink sweet tea and eat fried food?
Pretty much. You've cracked the code.
My husband's family is from Louisiana. So
good Creole food.
Yep. We have a lot of sweet tea in our house. Okay. Thank you so much, Debbie, for chatting with me again.
Thank you. I loved it.
I know.
You're so much fun.
I say this. I think the same about you.
Oh.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Hugs and happy authoring here at Author Like a Boss.
If you love the Author Like a Boss podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes. Until next time.